Tenemos que agradecer a TECNALIA que cuente con nosotros. Me voy a quitar la mascarilla para poder hablar más cómodo. Como decía, agradecer a TECNALIA que cuente con la SEFABE para hacer esta breve introducción de lo que es el proyecto. Como decía, es la presentación y posteriormente el desarrollo de distintos talleres entre hoy y mañana de un proyecto interesante sobre la circularidad y el aprovechamiento medioambiental de las fachadas. Como vemos aquí, el proyecto europeo consta de varias etapas, está a punto de finalizar el mes que viene. Se estudian y analizan distintos casos con distintas metodologías y luego también una de las claves siempre en este tipo de proyectos son estas jornadas de información, de divulgación y de difusión de los estudios que se han realizado, los datos que se han recopilado y lo que es más importante, las conclusiones a las que se pueda llegar. Es un proyecto de especial importancia en el momento en el que estamos. Estamos en una situación que todo el mundo sufre en mayor o menor medida de escasez de materias primas, demoras en las entregas de los suministros. Pues bien, es un proyecto oportuno porque justamente pone el foco en un nuevo concepto, la minería urbana, que probablemente ya habréis oído hablar. Es decir, si hay escasez de materias primas en la extracción, para luego la transformación, la elaboración y puesta en obra de algunos de los materiales en los edificios, ¿por qué no aprovechar lo que ya tenemos instalado, recuperarlo y volverlo a incluir en el ciclo de aprovechamiento de los edificios? Por lo tanto, aquí tenemos dos conceptos claves de economía circular y el menor impacto posible al medio ambiente. Con lo cual, repito, es procedente, es pertinente, es interesante y os animo a que estéis no solo en el resto de la jornada, sino también que podáis asistir a los diferentes talleres que se van a ir desarrollando. Por último, welcome to our European colleagues for their presence here and for their knowledge and their presentations, and I hope to see you again just in 1 year during the celebration of e-Power and Building in these premises, just in 1 year. I wish you a very profitable 2 days here in Madrid. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Sí, buenos días. Soy Julen Astudillo de TECNALIA y queríamos continuar con la presentación del proyecto del que os queremos hablar durante estas sesiones. Al final es un proyecto europeo que ha durado 2 años y en el que lo que queremos buscar sobre todo es la logística inversa de los productos de construcción, focalizándonos sobre todo en la parte de metales y en la envolvente. Entonces, es un proyecto en el que han participado diferentes entidades y aquí en este gráfico podemos ver un poco cuál es el planteamiento que hemos tenido para recuperar el valor de diferentes materiales que tenemos a lo largo del ciclo de vida de la construcción. Y buscar o plantear nuevas posibilidades para reutilizar de una mejor manera estos materiales. Tal y como ha comentado Pablo Martín previamente, ahora andamos con un problema de suministros muy fuerte y el uso de este tipo de metodologías al final pueden ayudar a que minoremos el problema que tenemos actualmente y bueno, al final ser sobre todo más sostenibles y tratar todo el planteamiento que hay en la construcción desde un punto de vista circular. Entonces, el planteamiento que tenemos es mejorar en la logística y para eso digamos que tenemos que intervenir en diferentes aspectos de todo el proceso metodológico. Una primera parte tiene que ver con los materiales en sí mismos. Al final pueden ser modificados o adaptados o mejorados para poder ser luego mejormente reciclados. Podemos verificar la parte de la fabricación para que de esta manera ese reciclado posterior y ese uso pueda ser más correcto y de una mejor manera. El ensamblado de los diferentes productos tiene mucho que ver. En el ámbito de las fachadas, la forma en la que se ensamblan los productos puede hacer que luego sea más perjudicial o más problemático la forma en la que se pueden reciclar, con lo cual ese ensamblado tiene que ser tenido en cuenta. Y luego ya lo que tenemos es el montaje y la deconstrucción, en la que se pueden actuar de diferentes maneras para poder utilizar estos productos de mejor forma y facilitar su reciclado posterior. Teniendo en cuenta siempre al propietario, al cliente, cara a no involucrarle en problemas adicionales y ayudarle en todo el proceso para que al final todo este proceso sea más eficiente. Podemos ver aquí cómo está todo el proceso de reciclado. En la parte azul vemos el proceso de fabricación, montaje, instalación, de construcción, y en la parte verde lo que tenemos es el proceso de reutilización, reparación, etcétera, etcétera, que al final utilizándolo de una forma optimizada nos puede permitir mejorar todos los procesos que tenemos con respecto al reciclado de los diferentes elementos y componentes que entran en un proceso constructivo. Y lo que estamos planteando en este proyecto es lo que tenemos en verde en la diapositiva, que es el reverse logistics, que al final es la forma de revertir o de reutilizar todos estos materiales de una mejor manera. Y que hasta el momento, digamos que la parte verde es la que no se está utilizando tanto, o al final está causando más problemas que beneficios, y es lo que se quiere cambiar con actuaciones como la que estamos planteando en este proyecto. El proyecto, digamos, cuenta con dos tipologías de participantes claramente diferenciados. Tenemos la parte de los centros de investigación y universidades, como la Universidad de Delft, que es el coordinador del proyecto, TECNALIA, que somos los que organizamos también parte del trabajo, el KU Leuven, la Universidad de Aachen, la Universidad de Leiden o la Universidad de Coventry. Todas estas universidades y centros han participado en los diferentes desarrollos que se han hecho en el proyecto. Y luego tenemos asociaciones como la asociación VMRG, que es la Asociación Holandesa de Fabricantes de Ventanas y Fachadas, ASEFABE, que es la asociación española, y luego el Council for Aluminium in Building, que es otra de las asociaciones que ha tomado parte en el proyecto, y que lo que quieren hacer es los conocimientos y desarrollos que se han hecho en el proyecto, transferirlos a la industria para que puedan ser utilizados por ellos. El proyecto lo que cuenta es con bastante material educativo que luego va a estar disponible para aquellas personas que lo consideren interesantes y para las asociaciones, para que puedan explicar el proyecto correctamente y ayudar a las empresas en todo este proceso. Tener en cuenta también otra cosa, vamos a tener sobre este proyecto 3 sesiones en esta feria. Ahora tenemos la primera, a las 3:30 tendremos la segunda, y mañana tenemos otra un poquito más larga, a las 4:30 de la tarde, en la que trataremos de avanzar un poquito más de forma más práctica en los diferentes desarrollos. Y luego toda esta información va a estar disponible para todo el mundo. Y también comentaros que sobre todo las sesiones de esta tarde y la de mañana, más los ponentes que vienen ahora, lo que van a hacer es hacer sus presentaciones en inglés. Con lo cual ayudaremos los que estamos dentro del proyecto si alguien tiene algún problema no entendiendo alguna parte, pero a partir de ahora las siguientes presentaciones que van a dar mis compañeros van a estar dadas en inglés. Y bueno, comentaros un poquito cuál es el programa. Tenemos el programa de ahora hasta las 12:45, que es al final comentar sobre todo aspectos relacionados con el diseño y la ingeniería de la fachada y los productos de la construcción. Luego a la tarde, a las 3:30, lo que hablaremos más serán de los modelos de negocio que están relacionados con esta nueva actividad o nueva forma de reutilizar los materiales, que tendremos aquí mismo a las 3:30. Y luego mañana a las 4:30 lo que tendremos serán dos sesiones dentro de un mismo bloque, uno sobre la gestión del impacto medioambiental que tienen todos estos procesos y cuál sería una planificación para trasladar los procesos actuales a una economía circular. Entonces, de todo esto comentaremos mañana en este mismo sitio a las 4:30. Y ahora le paso la palabra a mi colega Juan Azcárate, de la Universidad de Delft, que os comentará un poquito cuál ha sido el proceso de este proyecto y aspectos generales del mismo.
Cool. Hello. Good morning. I'm going to switch into English because that's the language of the course. So if you have any questions, please feel free to address it in Spanish. I'm going to introduce briefly what the EIT RawMaterials is, what they do. Basically, it's EU-funded program that wonders why are raw materials important for society and how we can keep them in loops of reuse. Why are they important? Well, we can see that there's a huge increase in the consumption of raw materials in many industries. Especially over the last 100 years, the more we develop new technologies, the more we rely on more and more diverse elements and materials to be able to work as a society, basically. This is, of course, no different in the case of construction and architecture. We see that all kinds of products which are currently embedded into our buildings are heavily reliant on a huge diversity of different materials, from low energy lamps to all kinds of electrical equipment, energy efficiency equipment, etc. Basically, we rely on more and more diverse materials and elements as time passes. Especially if we look at sustainability in construction, we see that many of the technologies we rely on for a clean transition require very specific elements. So, for example, gallium for solar farms, neodymium for wind farms, or cobalt for electric vehicles. All of these elements are in very specific supply, and they are in very limited supply also in terms of geopolitical regions. You can only get them in certain parts of the world, and they're very difficult to substitute. And we highly rely, as I said, on very specific places where these materials can be mined. So cobalt is mostly taken from the DRC. China has a huge stock of specific materials which are only available there, so they have a lot of control over the supply of these materials. And basically what the EIT RawMaterials tries to do is explore new ways, both on the terms of mining, but also in terms of urban mining and other forms of recovery of elements and materials, in which we can bring all these materials that we already have in Europe back into a reuse loop, so that we can actually get the value out of them and we don't rely so much on other countries for the supply of these raw materials and elements. If you want more information about them, that's their website. And they are a very good party for funding all kinds of projects involving this topic. To go a bit into the FacadeReLog content itself, as Julian already showed, this is basically the forward logistics chain that we're already used to dealing with, in which you fabricate parts out of raw materials, you assemble into modules, then these are assembled into parts, which are then distributed to the customer, in this case the construction industry in buildings all around Europe. Reverse logistics is basically doing the opposite, so finding ways in which you can reuse components, you can repair them, you can remanufacture them, and you can recycle. Of course, each one of the steps destroys more of the value in the component, so you really want to keep, for example, if reuse, repair, remanufacture are an option, you can preserve more of the value of the component. While recycling, you are basically breaking down the component into its essential parts and therefore you have to invest a lot of energy into breaking it apart, and then a lot of energy into bringing it back together into new products. The way in which these steps look in the construction industry is basically the deconstruction step, in which you go to the site, you break the building apart into pieces, you collect these components, and then you transport them to an inspection and sorting facility, and then basically in the inspection and sorting facility you remanufacture or repair them, and then you find a real-life option for them for a second generation. Of course, there's a lot of internal and external drivers and barriers to this change. So we see in terms of opportunities, you have less impact in the world. You have new sources of revenue if you find new business models, for example. You save costs by being able to reuse your own components. On the barrier side, we have lack of knowledge and lack of standards for actually recovering and reusing these components at a high value. You have the additional effort that is required to collect and relocate these materials, and which of course needs new types of supply chains, as the ones that we'll be looking at today. And a lack of proper design, lack of incentives across the industry for different stakeholders. So it's really like a whole set of challenges that have to be overcome, but also many drivers on the business side that can actually convince people to do it. So the way that the course is organized and the way that they will be working in the next 2 days is we will be trying to address many of the practical questions involved in this idea of facade reverse logistics. So for example, from the financial aspect, how can you extract value from these products? And how can you make new value from reusing them? What kind of new technologies and processes and applications are needed and have to be developed in order to be able to reuse these components? What are the roles that different stakeholders have to take in a new circular facade industry? What kind of information they need? And which are the drivers and barriers that will lead these stakeholders to either play a role or not? And the program is divided into 3 main parts. The first is on circular building products and engineering, so the design and engineering aspects of it. The second one, later this afternoon, will be on business and supply chain models. And the third one, tomorrow afternoon, will be on life cycle cost analysis and evaluation, so more on the environmental aspects involved. And all of this has been done online in previous courses over the last 2 years. And today and tomorrow, the idea is to bring all these topics together into one single session that combines all these aspects and all these perspectives. And now I will give the floor to my colleague Tilman Klein, who will talk about the design and engineering aspects of it.
So, thank you very much, Juan. Just to bring what we've said in the context of building products, I have some slides for you. The first is to know we have to consider that about the impact of building construction is about 30% of the primary energy use, 26% of materials resource use, and 35% of waste generation. And so basically buildings are stocks of materials, you can see that. And a lot comes down to building products. So basically in building products is where we implement the properties our building's going to have in the future. So when we talk about building products, just to show you some slides, you understand what we define. Basically everything starts with materials, and the materials are the base ingredient for construction, of course. But in the building industry, we rarely work with pure materials. We don't work with steel or sand. We work with standard or commercial materials and components. We work with concrete, which is a compound of different parts. The next level from those, we talk about components, and that will, for example, be a window frame, and or installations. And then we also talk about assemblies, and that is when we bring components from different crafts together into one. Yeah? And there's the building level. So when we talk about building products in this scale, we talk about these 3 scales. That's basically systems prefabricated by the industry offered to the market. So again, if you go to the standard life cycle sets, you know, from production of buildings to construction, use, the end use of service, you know, this is here where we developed building products. So basically that's something that's done before the actual design of buildings starts, right? And so products are made in anticipation of decision makers, architects, you know, clients, anything. And so this is basically what we want to focus on, is the building products, because here we implement basically circular strategies. Just talk about circular facades. And this is a cycle that actually Juan drew. So basically we have a resource supply, and then you have standard material manufacturing, product manufacturing. This is the, you know, the pink part I just showed you about. Facade design and engineering, that is done by engineers, architects. So construction, installation on site. Then it comes to use of the buildings, the end of service, and normally then materials get recycled or landfilled, and everything starts again. And so these are actually the strategies that we're talking about when we talk about circular products. So that's, for example, the end of service, the recycled components, but we want to close loops in terms of remanufacturing parts. I have an example for that, what that means. In terms of reuse of whole components, we can slow the loops in terms of better service and maintenance, or narrow the loops in terms of, you know, better resource optimization. So these are basically the circular strategies that we want to deploy. Just here some examples. This is part of student work done with the industry together. This one with Allianz and Steel. So basically, when they're looking at their system, I think we have a next slide like that. You know, this is a steel system they have, what we redesigned in such a way that basically you can just exchange infill components much easier and frames, and the main structure of the facade could be standing, you know, for a future upgrade. So, and they built a mock-up of it to test if it works. Other interesting building products we have, that's a Dutch company, Pretty Plastic, and they make facade tiles from recycled plastic in a very interesting approach by collecting plastic, sorting it, cleaning it, then there's color sorted, and they have molds and they press it again. And this product itself can be recycled as well. So I think this is one of the really circular, you know, products that I've seen in the market, from the beginning to the end, made from waste, and then can be recycled, reused. That's very interesting approach. And they are spending up and have the first buildings made now on the market. This is another experiment we did with students in Cornea, called Facade Systems, and different other suppliers, is look at the idea of remanufacturing. What that actually means is you take your product apart and you know which part of the components you can reuse in a high way, and actually remanufacturing to as good as new. And when you look, for example, this is a sun shading system here, you know, when you take it apart, most of the components, they can go on in a second life. You know, what is, you know, the screen itself that needs to be exchanged, the engines need upgrade. But so the remanufacturing is a very interesting part, like theory for the facade industry, to look at what components can get multiple life cycles and basically last forever. So that's it, a bit for the introduction. And so we were here, and now we have prepared a little workshop based on case studies. And Juan is taking over again.
I'm sure you can hear me. I think because we're quite few in the room, maybe we can just go for direct questions. If any of you have questions, it can also be in Spanish.
Yeah. Awesome.
And we can just have like a small conversation here with the people that are here.
Yeah. Or are you interested in some exchange, or do you need to go on to the next session? No?
I think it's basically only here.
No. Okay.